The cafeteria on Station Alpha 7 buzzed with the usual mix of conversations in dozens of languages. Crystalline Xenorians clinked their feeding tubes together while discussing quantum mechanics. Furry Malthari shared meat strips and complained about the cold, atmospheric settings humans preferred. Even the blob-like Gelatons had formed their own corner, their translucent bodies shifting colors as they communicated through light patterns. But in the far corner, near the observation windows that showed the swirling nebula outside, sat a figure that everyone avoided. Kira Vex 9, a Silithian warrior caste female, occupied an entire table by herself. Her dark purple skin bore the ritual scars of her people, and her forearms moved with the precise, deadly grace that made other species nervous. Two curved horns jutted from her forehead, and her predator eyes swept the room constantly, as if searching for threats. The other station inhabitants gave her table a wide berth. When she stood to get food, conversations quieted and beings stepped aside. It wasn't just her imposing 7-foot frame or the ceremonial blades she wore. Though station regulations technically prohibited weapons, nobody dared tell a Silithian warrior to disarm. It was something else, something that made even the bravest spacers uncomfortable in her presence. Marcus Chen, a human technician with grease-stained coveralls and tired eyes, entered the cafeteria during the evening shift change. He'd been working for 18 straight hours trying to fix the station's temperamental gravity generators, and his stomach growled loud enough to draw annoyed looks from a group of insectoid Vexhi. He grabbed a tray and loaded it with the human-compatible protein cubes, synthetic vegetables, and something the food dispensers optimistically called coffee. As Marcus scanned the crowded cafeteria looking for an empty seat, his eyes landed on Kira Vex 9's table. The Silithian was methodically eating what looked like raw meat, cutting it into precise portions with one of her smaller ceremonial knives. Around her, at least 20 empty chairs sat unused, despite the cafeteria being packed. Most beings would have kept looking for another option. Marcus was tired, his feet hurt, and he'd dealt with enough complicated alien politics for one day. But something about the sight bothered him. He'd grown up in the outer colonies where you learned early that being different didn't make someone dangerous. And being dangerous didn't necessarily make someone bad. Without overthinking it, Marcus walked over to Kira Vex 9's table. The conversations around them died as other beings noticed his approach. The Silithian's head snapped up, her golden eyes fixing on him with an intensity that would have sent most creatures fleeing. Her four hands went very still, one hovering near a blade handle. "Mind if I sit here?" Marcus asked, gesturing to the chair across from her. His voice carried just far enough for nearby tables to hear, and the silence spread like ripples in water. Kira Vex 9 stared at him for a long moment. Her people were warriors bred for conquest, trained from birth to read threats and weaknesses in any opponent. But this small human male showed no signs of challenge or fear. His scent carried exhaustion and machine oil, not adrenaline or aggression. His stance was relaxed, almost casual, as if sitting with a Silithian warrior was the most natural thing in the galaxy. "You know what I am," she said finally, her voice carrying the slight growl that marked her species. It wasn't quite a question. "Yeah," Marcus said, setting his tray down and pulling out the chair. "You're someone eating lunch alone in a crowded room. Seemed like you could use some company." He sat down and began unwrapping his protein cubes, apparently unconcerned by the 4 sets of razor-sharp claws or the reputation of Silithian berserker rage. Around them, the cafeteria remained unusually quiet, with beings pretending not to watch while straining to hear every word. Kira Vex 9 found herself in unfamiliar territory. She'd been on this station for 6 standard months, serving as a cultural liaison between the Silithian Empire and the Galactic Trade Federation. Every day, she performed her duties with mechanical precision, attended meetings where other delegates spoke to her with barely concealed fear, and returned to her quarters alone. The isolation was a weight she'd grown accustomed to carrying. "I am Kira Vex 9 of the Ninth Warrior House," she said formally, as protocol demanded. "Marcus Chen, Engineering Department," he replied, taking a bite of his protein cube and making a face. "These things taste like recycled air filters. I keep meaning to try the alien food dispensers, but half the stuff looks like it's still moving." Despite herself, Kira Vex 9's mouth twitched slightly. "Silithian cuisine prizes freshness. We consume our protein sources within moments of the kill. That explains why yours looks so much better than mine," Marcus said, eyeing her meal with what seemed like genuine interest rather than disgust. "Is it rude to ask what it is?" "Yith beast from my homeworld," she replied, cutting another precise piece. "My family sends preserved portions in the monthly supply ships." Marcus nodded as if receiving packages of alien meat was perfectly normal dinner conversation. "That's nice. My mom used to send care packages when I first started working deep space. Nothing fancy, just cookies and coffee from Earth. Made the long shifts feel less lonely." The simple honesty in his words caught Kira Vex 9 off guard. In her culture, admitting to loneliness was seen as weakness, yet this human spoke of it as casually as discussing the weather. She found herself studying his face more carefully, not as a warrior evaluating a potential threat, but as someone trying to understand a puzzle. "Your mother shows wisdom in maintaining family bonds across distance," she said carefully. "Yeah, she's pretty great," Marcus agreed. "Probably wondering why her son is sitting in space station cafeterias instead of settling down planetside like she wants. But someone has to keep these old stations running, and honestly, I like the work. There's something satisfying about fixing things that are broken." As they continued eating, the conversations around them gradually resumed, though many beings still cast curious glances their way. Marcus seemed oblivious to the attention, chatting about his work on the gravity generators and asking simple questions about Silithian technology. His manner was so natural that Kira Vex 9 found herself responding without the formal diplomatic language she usually employed. For the first time in months, she wasn't counting the minutes until she could retreat to her quarters. Word of the human technician's boldness spread through Station Alpha 7 faster than a hull breach alarm. By the next day, beings throughout the station were talking about Marcus Chen, the small human who'd sat down with the fearsome Silithian without hesitation. Some called it stupidity, others suspected it was some kind of elaborate death wish, but everyone agreed it was unprecedented. Marcus, for his part, seemed completely unaware of the stir he'd caused. He went about his duties as usual, crawling through maintenance shafts and arguing with stubborn machinery. When the evening shift ended, he returned to the cafeteria and, to everyone's amazement, walked straight to Kira Vex 9's table again. "How'd the diplomatic meetings go today?" he asked, settling into what was already becoming his regular chair. Kira Vex 9 had spent the day fielding questions about her new dining companion. The Malthari delegate had asked if the human was some kind of spy. A Zenorian administrator wondered if sitting with her was part of an elaborate human mating ritual. Even her own government had sent a coded message asking for clarification on this unusual development in human-Silithian relations. "Tedious," she replied, which was both diplomatic and honest. "The Federation wishes to negotiate mining rights in Silithian space. They speak of mutual benefit while clearly seeing us as obstacles to profit." Marcus winced sympathetically. "Office politics. Same everywhere, I guess. Had to deal with some of that myself today. Station administrator wanted to know why I was fraternizing with potentially hostile alien forces." He made air quotes with his fingers, his expression showing what he thought of that description. "And your response?" Kira Vex 9 asked, curious despite herself. "Told him you seemed pretty friendly to me," and that the gravity generators don't care about interspecies politics. Marcus shrugged. Besides, hostile alien forces don't usually compliment my mom's chocolate chip cookies. She had mentioned finding his mother's care packages touching during their previous conversation, though she hadn't realized he'd interpreted it as a compliment. The human's ability to find common ground in the smallest interactions was unlike anything in her experience. As the days passed, their dinner meetings became routine. Marcus would finish his shift and find Kira Vex 9 at her usual table, often with engineering problems to puzzle through aloud. She discovered that talking through technical challenges helped her understand the station's systems better, which proved useful in her diplomatic work. He seemed to genuinely value her insights, treating her four-armed physiology as an advantage for multitasking rather than a frightening aberration. I've been thinking about your people's approach to engineering, Marcus said one evening, sketching diagrams on a data pad. The way you described Silithian ship construction, with redundant systems built into the hull structure itself. It's brilliant. We could apply similar principles to the station's power distribution. Kira Vex 9 felt an unfamiliar warmth at his enthusiasm. Warrior ships must function even when damaged. Our engineers design for survival, not efficiency. Sometimes survival is more efficient in the long run, Marcus countered. Mind if I run some modifications past the engineering department? I'd credit you as a consultant, of course. The idea of being seen as a technical contributor rather than just a diplomatic representative was appealing. I would be honored to assist. Their collaboration began attracting attention from other station inhabitants, though for different reasons than before. Instead of fearful whispers, Marcus and Kira Vex 9 found themselves fielding questions from curious engineers and scientists. A Xenorian physicist asked about Silithian metallurgy techniques. A human botanist wondered if Silithian agricultural methods could improve the station's food production. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's head of xenobiology, approached their table one evening with obvious hesitation. I apologize for interrupting, she began, but I've heard you've been discussing engineering applications. I was wondering if I might ask about Silithian medical practices. Kira Vex 9 tensed slightly. Her people's medical knowledge was closely guarded, considered too dangerous for other species to possess. What specifically interests you, Doctor? Combat trauma treatment, Dr. Vasquez said carefully. We've had several accidents recently. Industrial injuries that our standard protocols aren't handling well. I've read theoretical papers about Silithian battlefield medicine, but theory and practice are very different things. Marcus noticed the change in Kira Vex 9's posture and smoothly intervened. Elena, this is Kira Vex 9. Kira, Dr. Vasquez runs the medical bay. She's saved my hide more times than I can count. The introduction seemed to help. Kira Vex 9 relaxed slightly and studied the doctor with professional interest. You have treated humans injured by industrial equipment? Unfortunately, yes. Marcus here is a frequent patient. Dr. Vasquez shot him a meaningful look. Some people think maintenance shafts are safer than they actually are. Only got stuck twice this month, Marcus protested. That's an improvement. Despite the gravity of the medical discussion, Kira Vex 9 found herself almost smiling at their exchange. These humans treated potentially dangerous situations with humor rather than fear, not because they were reckless, but because they refused to let fear paralyze them. Silithian field medicine focuses on stabilization and rapid healing acceleration, she said finally. I cannot share classified techniques, but I could demonstrate basic trauma assessment methods that might prove useful. Dr. Vasquez's relief was obvious. That would be incredibly helpful. We could set up a training session in the medical bay if you're willing. As word of the impromptu medical consultation spread, other department heads began approaching their table. The security chief wanted advice on dealing with aggressive alien wildlife that occasionally found its way onto cargo ships. The communications officer was curious about Silithian encryption methods. Each request was carefully considered, with Kira Vex-9 sharing what she could without compromising military secrets. Marcus watched these interactions with growing admiration. The Silithian warrior was revealing herself to be far more than the fearsome fighter everyone had assumed. She was intelligent, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in helping solve problems. Her insights often approached challenges from angles that other species missed, leading to innovative solutions. "You realize what's happening, don't you?" Marcus asked one evening as they reviewed station efficiency reports that had improved dramatically over the past few weeks. "Clarify," Kira Vex-9 requested, though she had her suspicions. "People are starting to see you as part of the station community, not just a visiting diplomat," Marcus explained. "Dr. Vasquez told me yesterday that her emergency response times have improved 30% since you showed her those triage techniques. Engineering wants to recommend your hull-strengthening proposals to Fleet Command. You're making a real difference here." Kira Vex-9 considered this. In all her years of military service and diplomatic assignments, she'd never experienced anything like the collaborative atmosphere that had developed around their simple dinner conversations. Her reports to the Silithian High Command had grown longer and more detailed, filled with observations about human adaptability and problem-solving approaches that defied conventional wisdom about inferior species. "And you," she said, fixing Marcus with her golden gaze, "realize that your simple act of choosing to sit at my table has altered the dynamics of this entire station?" Marcus looked genuinely surprised by the suggestion. "I just wanted somewhere to eat my dinner." The absolute sincerity in his voice made something shift in Kira Vex-9's understanding of human nature. This man had approached her not because he was brave or foolish or seeking advantage, but because he saw an empty chair next to someone who looked lonely. The profound simplicity of his motivation was perhaps the most alien thing she'd encountered in all her travels across the galaxy. 3 months after Marcus first sat at Kira Vex-9's table, Station Alpha 7 faced its greatest crisis. The early warning systems detected an approaching asteroid field, debris from a collapsed solar system that had been pulled off course by a rogue planet's gravity well. The station's position made it impossible to evacuate in time, and the existing deflector shields weren't powerful enough to handle impacts from objects the size of small moons. Emergency protocols activated throughout the station. Captain Rodriguez called all department heads to the command center, while automated systems began calculating survival probabilities. The numbers were not encouraging. Even with full power to the shields, the station would likely suffer catastrophic hull breaches. Evacuation ships could carry perhaps 30% of the station's population before the asteroid field arrived. "We need options, people," Captain Rodriguez announced to the assembled emergency team. "Engineering. What can you give me?" Chief Engineer Park looked grim. "We can boost shield power by rerouting from life support, but that only buys us time. The asteroids are too large and too numerous. We need a way to deflect them before they reach us." "What about the military ships in dock?" asked Commander Stevens from security. 3 cargo haulers and a courier vessel," Captain Rodriguez replied. "None equipped for asteroid bombardment." In the corner of the command center, Marcus had been running calculations on his data pad while half listening to the discussion. The engineering solutions they were proposing would work in theory, but they were thinking in standard Federation terms. They needed something more innovative, more adaptable. "Captain," he said, stepping forward hesitantly, "I might have an idea, but I'd need to consult with our Silithian liaison." The command staff exchanged glances. During the crisis briefing, they'd been focused on Federation resources and hadn't considered diplomatic personnel as part of the solution. "Explain," Captain Rodriguez ordered. "Silithian ships are built differently than ours," Marcus said, his words coming faster as his excitement grew. They use modular hull sections that can be reconfigured in space. If we could adapt their construction techniques to our deflector arrays, we might be able to create focused deflection beams instead of a general shield. Chief Park frowned. Even if that's possible, we don't have Silithian engineers here. But we have their liaison, Marcus insisted, and she's been working with our engineering teams for weeks. She understands our systems as well as her own. Captain Rodriguez made the decision quickly. Get her up here, now. Minutes later, Kira Vex 9 entered the command center with the measured stride of a warrior walking into battle. She assessed the situation immediately, her 4 hands already moving to different control interfaces as Marcus quickly explained the crisis and his proposed solution. Deflection focusing using modular array construction, she repeated thoughtfully, theoretically possible, but it would require real-time reconfiguration of the entire deflector network. Can it be done? Captain Rodriguez asked directly. Kira Vex 9 was quiet for several seconds, her golden eyes moving between the sensor displays showing the approaching asteroids and the engineering schematics Marcus had pulled up. When she spoke, her voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who'd made life-or-death decisions on countless battlefields. Yes, but not with your current control systems. Silithian ship modifications require 4-handed coordination and split-second timing. Your interface systems are designed for 2-handed operation. What do you need? The captain asked. Direct access to the deflector control matrix, override authority for power distribution systems, and... She paused, looking at Marcus. A human partner who understands both our technologies. Chief Park looked skeptical. You're talking about manually controlling a system designed to be automated. One mistake could overload the entire power grid. The automated system will fail, Kira Vex 9 stated flatly. Your computers cannot adapt quickly enough to redirect deflection fields in real time. This requires intuition and experience, not just calculation. Captain Rodriguez studied the Silithian warrior, weighing the risks. She was asking for almost complete control over the station's most critical systems during a crisis. If she made an error, or if this was some kind of elaborate sabotage, the entire station would be defenseless. Marcus stepped forward again. Captain, I've worked with her for months. She's saved more lives on this station through her medical consultations than any of us. If she says she can do this, I trust her. And I trust him, Kira Vex 9 added, her voice carrying an emotion that surprised everyone present, including herself. We have worked as partners before. We can do so again. The captain looked around the command center at his staff, reading the mixture of hope and fear in their expressions. Outside the observation ports, the first asteroidal debris was already visible as bright streaks against the nebula. Do it, he ordered. What followed was 30 minutes of the most intense coordination anyone on Station Alpha 7 had ever witnessed. Kira Vex 9 took position at the main deflector controls, her 4 hands dancing across interfaces that had never been operated by non-human physiology. Marcus stood beside her at the power distribution console, watching her movements and anticipating her needs with an intuition that seemed almost telepathic. As each wave of asteroids approached, Kira Vex 9 would reconfigure the deflector arrays in impossible patterns, creating focused beams that nudged the largest rocks just enough to change their trajectory. Marcus rerouted power faster than the automated systems could process, feeding energy to whichever array needed it most while keeping the station's other vital systems online. Large cluster incoming bearing 27 Mark IV, announced the sensor operator. I see it, Kira Vex 9 replied, her hands already moving. Marcus, I need 60% power to arrays 7 through 12. Rerouting from environmental and secondary computing, Marcus responded, his fingers flying over his controls. You'll have full power in 3 seconds. The deflection beam lanced out, striking the lead asteroid with precise force. The rock tumbled away from the station, colliding with two smaller fragments and sending them spinning harmlessly into space. "Excellent," Kira Vex 9 said with satisfaction. "Your power distribution timing improves with each engagement." "Your targeting is getting more efficient too," Marcus replied. "That last shot saved us about 30% energy over the computer's projected requirement." Around them, the command staff watched in amazement as the human and Silithian worked together with a synchronization that defied every assumption about interspecies cooperation. They communicated in half-sentences and shared glances, their coordination so smooth it seemed choreographed. When the last of the asteroid field had passed safely by the station, the command center erupted in relieved cheers. Damage reports came in showing minimal impact scarring and no hull breaches. Every life on the station had been saved by the impossible partnership between a tired human technician and a lonely Silithian warrior. Captain Rodriguez approached Kira Vex 9 and Marcus as they powered down the deflector arrays. "That was the finest piece of crisis management I've ever seen," he said formally. "The Federation will be recommending both of you for commendations." Kira Vex 9 straightened into a formal posture. "I was performing my duties as station liaison, Captain." "No," Marcus said quietly, and everyone turned to look at him. "You were being a friend to all of us." The simple words seemed to affect the Silithian warrior more than all the formal praise. Her golden eyes softened slightly, and when she spoke, her voice had lost its diplomatic edge. "Friendship," she said slowly, as if testing the word's weight. "An interesting concept. In Silithian culture, we have bonds of duty, honor, and blood loyalty. But friendship, this is something different." "Yeah," Marcus agreed, cleaning machine oil off his hands with a rag. "It's choosing to sit together even when you don't have to." Later that evening, the cafeteria threw an impromptu celebration for the station's survival. Beings from dozens of species shared food and stories, the usual barriers lowered by their shared relief. At the center of it all, Marcus and Kira Vex 9 sat at their regular table, now surrounded by friends from every department on the station. Dr. Vasquez raised her drink. "To the partnership that saved us all," she declared. The crowd cheered, but Marcus shook his head. "Not partnership," he corrected, looking at the Silithian warrior who had become so much more than a fearsome alien in the corner. "Friendship." Kira Vex 9 considered this distinction and found it suited her better than any military rank or diplomatic title she'd ever held. Around them, the celebration continued, but she was content to sit quietly with her friend, surrounded by a community that had learned something important about the power of choosing to see past differences. In her final report to the Silithian High Command, she would write extensively about human adaptability, ingenuity, and courage under pressure. But the quality that impressed her most would be harder to quantify. Their willingness to extend simple kindness to strangers, even when those strangers looked like ancient enemies. And in the margins of that report, in her personal notes that no one else would read, she wrote about a human technician who had taught her that sometimes the most powerful force in the galaxy was simply choosing to sit down beside someone who was sitting alone.